Don't let anybody make you think that God chose America as his divine messianic force to be a sort of policeman of the whole world. God has a way of standing before the nations with judgment, and it seems that I can hear God saying to America, you're too arrogant. And if you don't change your ways, I will rise up and break the backbone of your power.
Hotep, which in the language of ancient Egypt means we come with justice in peace. Welcome to Freedom Now, a Saturday Pan-Africanist and Internationalist World Affairs program. Freedom Now is committed to the principle of the rights of all peoples and nations to self-determination. We thank you deeply for your contribution to KPFK, which permits programs like Freedom Now to stay on the air. In this era of corporate acquisition and co-optation of all dissident media, we provide the microphone, challenging their corporate and racist point of view. So stay tuned for our agenda here at Freedom Now.
Hawaii Gani. This is Sister Thage with Freedom Now's Fund Drive agenda for this Saturday, October 4th, 2025. Today's central theme is Black girlhood and womanhood, oppression and resistance. In our tribute program to our new ancestor and forever warrior, Mama Assata Shakur. Shakur means appreciation and thanks. It's a word used in many other languages in many cultures. You can say shukriya, shakur, shukran, etc. We commence today's program with our sister Luyanda Kuboka and the African Drumbeat Historical Calendar. And in continuing to give thanks, we go to then our prison radio commentary with Mumia Abu Jamal on the War Within, a message to Pan-Africa. And later in the hour, prolific author, radical historian, professor of African American Studies at the University of Houston, and Freedom Now co-producer, Dr. Gerald Horne interviews Aria S. Halliday, associate professor of Gender and Women's Studies and American Africana Studies at the University of Kentucky at Lexington, here to discuss her book, BlkGirls and How We Fail Them. Then, Dr. Horne interviews Pancho McFarland, professor of sociology at Chicago State University and author of the book, Food, Autonomy in Chicago. And this hour, as we are on Fund Drive, we need you to call in, please, or pledge online a tax-deductible donation at kpfk.org or by calling 818-985-KPFK. That's 818-985-5735. We have two thank you gifts this hour with either a $100 pledge or an $80 pledge. With either, you'll still become a voting listener member of the station, or you can also gift that to somebody else. And so for a donation of just $100 this hour, we're offering you a copy of the book Assata, an autobiography, the powerful story of Black revolutionary Assata Shakur, who survived state violence and found asylum in Cuba. And for a donation of just $80, you'll receive a pair of tickets to see the one and only Kamasi Washington, High Priest of Cosmic Jazz, live at the Blue Note in Hollywood. You've got two chances to witness this sonic revolutionary. You've got tickets for Thursday, October 9th at 7 p.m. and a pair of tickets for Sunday, October 12th at 9:30 p.m. with a pledge of $80 to KPFK to support Freedom Now. And so you can call in to pledge at 818-985-KPFK. That's 818-985-5735, or pledge online your tax-deductible donation at kpfk.org. Our music clip mix this hour includes MLK, Zap Mama, Ibeyi, Kamasi Washington, Sweet Honey in the Rock, Dead Prez, Esperanza Spalding, Angelique Kidjo, Stevie Wonder, and more. So sit back, phone a friend, and as always we stand ready for revolution. And as we give honor and tribute to Mama Assata Shakur, we honor that she didn't run from justice, she ran towards it, towards freedom, towards sovereignty, towards a revolution that called her sister and not suspect. While the US government labeled her a terrorist, Cuba called her a comrade. The FBI put her on a most wanted list, but Fidel offered her a home. This country, built on black pain, wanted her in chains, and Cuba said, "No more cages for warriors who've already survived them." Mama Assata is not just a name. She's a living chapter in the book of Black liberation. She's Mama Harriet's echo, Mama Sojourner's fire, Auntie Angela's kin, and Brother George's sister. The US said, "We want her dead or in a cell," and Cuba said, "She will live, and she will live well." They forgot that Mama Assata wasn't hiding. She was exiled. She was protected. She was watched over by ancestors who built palenques and plantations into free zones. And they think Cuba's a prison? No. Cuba is a break in the chain, an opening in the wall of empire. In the US, black women are shot in their sleep. Brianna, Ayana, Tatiana. And in Cuba, Mama Assata breathes. She breathed freely because revolution means you protect the most hunted and you lift up the most silenced. She once said, "Black people will never be free in a country that was founded on our backs and built on our suffering." The US teaches us that fugitives are criminals. But what is a criminal? Is a nation that fears a black woman with a pen more than it fears poverty, war, or police? Mama Assata was never the problem. She was the proof. The proof that black women can survive state terror and still write poetry and still teach babies to never bow to imperialist badges, and still be a mirror for every young black girl who knows this system was not made for her to survive in. And Cuba just didn't give Mama Assata her refuge. It gave her respect. It gave her time, gave her breath, gave her back to us. And so we owe Mama Assata more than just nostalgia. As we pay it forward to the youth, we owe her protection. We owe her truth-telling to pay forward. We owe her a fight that doesn't flinch. And so let this be the tribute. That we don't just say her name, that we say her vision. That we don't just quote her words, that we live them. That we build a world where no black woman needs exile to feel safe. Where every daughter of the diaspora can walk free, not just in Havana, but in Harlem, in Watts, in Atlanta. And so Mama Assata, we see you, still, as an ancestor, always. And not as a fugitive, not as an outlaw, always in our hearts, and always what you have been, free, black, woman, revolutionary. And in your name, we fight to make not a dream, but a fact. Again, the number to call to support this hour is 818-985-KPFK. Make your tax-deductible donation, or you can make it on kpfk.org.
Hotep. This is Sister Luyanda Koboga with this October 3rd weekly African drumbeat historical calendar of critical events and leaders which we acknowledge by giving publicity to their contributions so that we may gain inspiration to continue on the battle of human and spiritual values over greed and exploitation. October 3rd, 1952. The Mau Mau Revolution against British colonialism begins in Kenya. Mau Mau, or the Kikuyu forest fighters, fought against the British efforts to make Kenya a white settler colonial like South Africa. The Mau Mau, headed by Didon Kamathi, strategically targeted African colonial collaborators as their primary target, realizing that without collaborators, England could not sustain domination against the masses of Africans. October 3rd, 1904. The people of Namibia, Southwest Africa, begin armed struggle against German colonial occupation after the Heru genocidal massacre and the first Holocaust of the 20th century. October 5th, 1945. The 5th Pan-African Congress occurred in Manchester, England. This Congress gave a mass working class character to the Pan-African movement, as well as having in attendance Jomo Kenyatta, George Padmore, Kwame Nkrumah, C.L.R. James, and Amy Garvey, the wife of Marcus Garvey. This Congress called for the organization of mass political parties. It was anti-capitalistic in nature and was the final confrontation with colonialism. October 6, 1917. Fannie Lou Hamer, the powerful civil rights activist from the sharecropper background, was born. She exposed the hypocrisy of the Democratic Party at the 1964 Democratic Convention in Atlantic City, when the Democrats refused to acknowledge and seat the majority of citizens of Mississippi who were Africans. October 7, 1897. Elijah Muhammad, the leader of the Nation of Islam, was born. The Nation of Islam, the largest Islamic activist organization in the United States, under the teachings of Elijah Muhammad, many convicts and gang members were transformed into contributing members of the African community. October 8, 1804, Haiti becomes an independent nation after decades of brutal colonialism under the French. October 8, 1967, the U.S. CIA and its local puppets murder Che Guevara in Bolivia. Che, the co-architect of the Cuban Revolution and an internationalist who fought in the Congo and throughout South America against Western colonial and neo-colonial domination of humanity. October 9, 1980. Sister Ida Jimmy, the militant freedom fighter of Namibia, was imprisoned by the racist South African government, which refused the people of Namibia self-determination. October 9, 1823. Mary Ann Shard Carey, an African organizing in the U.S. and Canada, was a champion to fugitive slaves. She was the leader of the Black immigration movement. She was also the first Black woman to establish a newspaper in North America. This is Freedom Now, 90.7 FM in Southern California and 98.7 FM in Central California. Please check out our website at kpfk.org. Under Programs, then click on Freedom Now. As in our tradition to build unity, we request that you join us by chanting Amandla Awetu 3 times. This Azanian rally cry means the power is ours, so join us wherever you are. Amandla Awetu, Amandla Awetu, Amandla Awetu.
The War Within. Dear brothers, sisters, thank you for inviting me. What is happening in the world today, especially in America? Believe it or not, it has happened before, but only if we really honestly study our history and see it with clear eyes. After the U.S. Civil War, the deadliest war in U.S. history, the South, the loser in the war, struggled to win the tenuous peace by waging war against Reconstruction. The U.S. government planned to give Black folks their rights to American citizenship. White terrorists waged war against these newly freed people by making their citizenship empty and meaningless. They were attacked at their jobs, assaulted in the streets, and denied their right to vote, to serve on juries, or to join unions. The country that wrote, approved, and signed the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the Constitution into law then proceeded to ignore it for over 100 years when it came to the rights, privileges, and immunities of Black people in America. That's because what ruled the U.S. wasn't the Constitution. It was unwritten rules of white supremacy. Any country that can ignore its own Constitution for over 100 years can do anything. For what did the Constitution mean for Black folks? It meant nothing. What mattered above all else was whiteness. It took decades of struggles of the Black freedom movement to put a dent in the long, dirty history of white terrorism and white supremacy. This historical rhythm has created a cycle of U.S. history and replays itself in this very hour across the nation. That's the real reasoning behind the mindless assaults on Black history by the government of the U.S. They want to make Black history disappear as if it didn't really happen. The late, great revolutionary Dr. Frantz Fanon saw something similar during the Algerian Revolution. Fanon, speaking of the intentions of the French colonialists, wrote in his classic work, Wretched of the Earth, the following: colonialism is not satisfied with snaring the people in a net or of draining the colonized brain of any form or substance. With a kind of perverted logic, it turns attention to the past of the colonized people and distorts it, disfigures it, and destroys it. The words of Dr. Frantz Fanon from The Wretched of the Earth. Remember this: no government can wash away the history of a people. Resolve to teach your children our people's history so it can bloom in their hearts. There it will ring within for generations. With love, not fear. This is Mumia Abu Jamal. These commentaries are recorded by Noel Hanrahan of Prison Radio.
Family, this is Freedom Now on KPFK, radio powered by the people. And right now we're in the middle of our fund drive calling on you, our freedom-loving, truth-seeking listeners, to stand with us in this critical moment. And so for a donation of just $100, we want to give you something powerful, a powerful gift, something revolutionary, a copy of the book Assata, an autobiography by Assata Shakur, with a foreword by none other than Angela Davis. This book is more than just a memoir. It's a mirror into the soul of the Black liberation struggle. It is a love letter to Black womanhood, to resistance, and to survival. And it's a blueprint. Mama Assata's story isn't just about injustice, it's about transformation. It's about a woman hunted by the U.S. government, branded a criminal, and she found refuge in Cuba, a nation that dared to stand in solidarity with the oppressed. And in her own words, Mama Assata, she heard the echoes of Harriet Tubman, the defiance of Ida B. Wells, who she shared a birthday with, the fire of Fannie Lou Hamer. She reminds us that the fight for Black liberation knows no borders, that the revolutionary love and protection can come from places like Cuba, even as she was abandoned and demonized here in the U.S. at home. She said, "I am a 20th century escaped slave." Mama Assata Shakur wrote about the strength of Black women not as a myth, but as a necessity. The burden she carried, the battle we fight, the beauty we will create. Despite it all, she still wrote about sisterhood, about pain, about healing. And here's the truth. Stories like Mama Assata Shakur's are under attack, silenced in classrooms, erased in textbooks, criminalized in the media, but here at KPFK, we amplify them. And so when you support Freedom Now, you're not just donating to support to keep Freedom Now on the air and lights on in the building. You're fueling a voice that dares to speak truth in the face of empire. You're investing in liberated media, the kind that Mama Assata Shakur herself depended on to tell her story when no one else would. And so right now, call in, go online. For a pledge of just $100, you'll receive this essential piece of Black radical history, Assata, an autobiography. Call KPFK, that's 818-985-5735, or you can go to kpfk.org to make your pledge today, because Mama Assata Shakur's story is not just hers, it's ours, and it must be told. She was a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful Black revolutionary who told her powerful life story. She was a freedom fighter and political exile, a story the U.S. tried to silence. The number to call is 818-985-KPFK. That's 818-985-5735. You'll receive this book with a pledge of $100 to the station. It's a tax-deductible donation. This is not just a book, it's a blueprint for liberation. Here on Freedom Now, we want to expand upon the spirit and the consciousness of Mama Assata Shakur by sharing some clips from the 1997 documentary that was done on her, filmed in Havana, Cuba, by the filmmaker Gloria Rolando, called The Eyes on the Rainbow. And I just wanted to say, as your producer, co-host of Freedom Now, that my first delegation to Havana, Cuba in 2012, I went with our ancestor Didan Kamati. We went with the African Awareness Association on a delegation, and we met Gloria Rolanda. And we met her beautiful mother, who was in her 80s. And so to be in the home of the Cuban filmmaker and her mom, this was very powerful, and it tells to what is happening in the community and the power that we receive when we're also raised with the energy of our grandmothers. And so we will learn more about what has guided and guarded Mama Assata Shakur as well from her grandmother in these clips from the documentary film Eyes on the Rainbow.
The first person that I don't know, gave me the inner strength that I needed to overcome, or to be able to think about overcoming the tremendous odds that were against me, was my grandmother. She came from Wilmington, North Carolina, to see me at Yardville Prison. I was in that prison. I was put in a maximum security unit, in a cell with 2 guards in front of the cell 24 hours a day, and a cell between 2 gun towers that could train their guns directly on the cell. I was told that I was in the Yardville unit for women, even though I was the only woman, and they tried to keep me there for the rest of my life. My grandmother came to visit me there to tell me a dream, and she came with all of my family, and everybody was happy, and I'm like, what's happening with y'all? And they said, no, she had a dream, and I was like, okay. And so my grandmother's dream was that she was dressing me, that she was in an old house that she lived in when she lived in New York still, and she was putting clothes on me. I said, is that the dream? She said, that's the dream. And I said, well, was I little or big? She said, no, you were big. So I said, oh my God, the only time people dress anybody when they're grown is when they're dead. And so she said, no, I know what you're thinking, no. What this dream means is that you are going to leave this prison. I don't know when, but it's going to be much less time than you've already spent here. And, I didn't understand the dream, to be honest. It didn't make any sense to me. What does this have and wearing clothes have to do with getting out of prison? But my grandmother has always had dreams, and her dreams have always come true.
I don't know how my mother walked her trouble down. I don't know how my father stood his ground. I don't know how my people survived slavery. Oh, yeah, they, but
The moon and the sun once asked the earth, "Where are the women warriors?" The earth responded, "They have been scattered all over the world, but they can always be identified by the beauty in their eyes, which reflects the dignity and the greatness of the rainbow." Nevertheless, continued the earth, they suffer greatly, often much more than what is commonly endured by a human being. Why? Then the moon and the sun responded energetically, "We have to look for them. We have to bring them together. Because it is only women warriors who know how to survive in the midst of so much suffering, struggling, struggling, struggling."
The first thing that hit me was, just how beautiful the nature is here. Whether it's the sea, whether it's the plants. This is one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen in my life. Everything is so lush, so green, so ripe. And, just the climate made me immediately feel at home. I was very much impressed by the healthcare system, by the education system, by the sports teams, by all of the many things that the revolution has been able to accomplish. What has impressed me most has been how people live, just how people relate to each other. I mean, I come from a society that is literally at war with itself. I didn't even know how to react to people when I came here. People would just come off the street and start talking to me, and I would immediately get paranoid. What do they want? It was very difficult for me to realize, somebody would say, "What time is it?" or "Where did you buy that?" Because Cubans will come up to you and just talk to you, whether you were in a store, on a line, and that was something very different, that human contact. I was born in 1947 in New York City. I lived with my mother and my aunt and my grandparents in a house in Queens, New York, in Jamaica, Queens. And I stayed there until I was about 3 or something. And I went with my grandparents to live in Wilmington, North Carolina. My grandparents decided to go back to Wilmington because Wilmington was their home, and because also they wanted to open up a small business. They had saved all their money hoping to go back to Wilmington, and they did go back, and they opened up a small business on the beach by the sea. They opened the business because at that time Wilmington was completely segregated. Well, the South was just totally segregated. It was apartheid. What that meant was that there were black schools. For example, I went to a all-black school, the Gregory School. There were the black library. We grew up with that kind of reality of not voluntarily living like that, not voluntarily accepting apartheid, but understanding that the price of stepping out or standing up alone could possibly be death. African people are still not free, and there are still many, many political prisoners in the United States. It is time for us to demand total, immediate amnesty for all political prisoners and prisoners of war. If we do not take ourselves seriously, if we do not take our movement seriously, then we will have to hang our heads in front of our ancestors.
Yes, Mama Assata Shakur presente. You've just heard some clips from the 1997 documentary film Eyes on the Rainbow by Cuban filmmaker Gloria Rolando, and we are honoring the recent transition to the ancestor world of Mama Assata Shakur. As we are in Fund Drive here this hour, we are having as a premium with a $100 thank you gift the book Assata, an autobiography, And this book is not just the life story of Assata Shakur that you'll receive with a donation of $100 to the station by calling 818-985-KPFK. That's 818-985-5735, or donate online at kpfk.org. This book is a political act when you buy it. It's an unapologetic testimony of a Black revolutionary woman who survived the full weight of a white supremacist empire and lived to tell the truth. Mama Assata Shakur was born Joanne Chesmard, and when she came of the age in the belly of the beast, the racist, capitalist United States, it was from her youth in Jim Crow South that she had mentioned to the front lines of the Black Liberation Army that chronicles her information from a young woman searching for justice to a freedom fighter hunted by the state. And so in this autobiography, she exposes the ugly machinery of the American criminal and justice system, the frame-ups she went through, COINTELPRO surveillance, violent repression, and a court system designed not to find truth but to destroy resistance. She endured beating, solitary confinement, and a legal lynching attempt. They called her a terrorist. What she was a political prisoner of war. And when the system failed to kill her, she escaped, not just from prison, but from the narrative they wrote for her. In one of the most daring moments of the 21st century revolutionary history, Mama Assata Shakur found sanctuary in Cuba, a country that had the political will to protect Black revolutionaries when the U.S. wanted them dead or disappeared. And throughout the book, Mama Assata Shakur lifts up the voices and power of Black women, not just as symbols, but as real people resisting, organizing, and enduring. She reveals the spiritual cost of struggle, but also the revolutionary joy, love, and clarity that come with it. She doesn't romanticize about the movement. She honors it, critiques it, and pushes it forward. And so this autobiography is interwoven with poems, letters, and reflections that remind us that the revolution is both political and personal. It's about systems. And it's not just also about survival, but about the state and also the soul. This book is not safe. It is not sanitized. It is not meant to make you feel comfortable. It's meant to make you see clearly and act accordingly. But this isn't just a book. This is a record. This is a testimony. This is a map for every oppressed people resisting the violence of U.S. empire. Mama Assata Shakur was targeted by the state, framed, imprisoned, and tortured because she dared to fight back. She escaped the clutches of U.S. power and found refuge in Cuba. And so as she continued to live in exile, she recently passed away at the age of 78. And so we are honoring her today on Freedom Now. You can get her autobiography with a donation to the station. Not only are you receiving this powerful book and knowledge, but you're supporting KPFK Pacifica Radio. And so the number to call is 818-985-KPFK. That's 818-985-5735. Or you can pledge online at kpfk.org. This is movement work. And so your donation keeps the station alive. It keeps Freedom Now on the air. It keeps radical voices, revolutionary books, and anti-imperialist truth flowing to the people. And so let's honor Mama Assata Shakur. Let's study her. Let's continue to fight. 818-985-KPFK, 818-985-5735. Please get your copy of Assata, an autobiography, and stand on the side of freedom. We will now continue with historian professor Dr. Gerald Horne interviewing Aria S. Halliday on her book, BlkGirls and How We Fail Them.
For KPFK Los Angeles, this is Gerald Horne, and with me on the line is Aria S. Halliday, Associate Professor of Gender and Women's Studies and African American and Africana Studies at the University of Kentucky in Lexington, and author of the book, BlkGirls and How We Fail Them. Thank you for joining us on Freedom Now, KPFK Los Angeles, Professor Halliday.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. So why did you write this book?
This book honestly is an outgrowth of rage, I felt. I don't know if you've ever seen something on TV or watching a movie and you're like, why is this even happening? What is the point of this? And it was during the pandemic. I was watching this movie called Project Power that stars Jamie Foxx and Dominique Fishback. And within 2 minutes of the film, there's a Black girl character being assaulted by two guys. She gets picked up by the police. Then she gets kidnapped by Jamie Foxx's character, and then she's just generally harassed the entire film. And I was disturbed by how this kind of naming and kidnapping and harassment of this Black girl character is kind of intrinsic to the whole mode of the film. I mean, you can't watch the film without this being an important part of it. And I kept seeing this everywhere, over and over again. Black girls getting beat up, getting disrespected by the people who are supposed to care for them. And that being a kind of pivotal point for everyone else's evolution in the film.
So, what role do music moguls and hip hop play in your telling?
Well, I talk about in chapter 1 that, famous artists like Jay-Z and Diddy and T.I., all in the past decade or so have reinvigorated their brands by being fathers, right? Have made it a part of their narratives, of their identity, that, they are, the parents to especially girl children. And hip hop and all of its wonderful attributes has also been really detrimental to conversations about Black girls and Black women. And yet these men are using Black girls and women, as props to their kind of evolutionary shifts as fathers. And so I talk about folks like Jay-Z and how his relationship with Beyonce has become kind of global conversation. But more importantly, the way that he expresses himself as a father to Blue Ivy and his other two children, become a kind of pivotal conversation for like his evolution as a father. And there's some problematic details in there, right? And so I talk about how hip hop, both provides lessons and conversations to, Black men. I interviewed 10 or 12 of the Black men friends that I have, and they all talk about how hip hop was pivotal to their understanding of their identity and who they are as men. But it also has, communications that are deeply concerning about how we father, how we parent, how we love. And I wanted to talk about that in conversations with Black girls.
What is Beast of the Southern Wild, and what role does it play in your story?
Beast of the Southern Wild is a pretty famous film at this point. It's critically acclaimed. And it's based in what is called the Bathtub, or an area in lower Louisiana near the levees. And a Black girl character is basically responsible for maintaining the community that's there. And despite the fact that she's like constantly being, left alone, she's being abandoned by her father. She's being abandoned by her other family members, and she kind of has this ghost of her mother kind of looming around throughout. And so Beast of the Southern Wild is a wonderful film for many different reasons, but I was kind of disturbed that no one critically talked about this Black girl character and how she was being treated throughout the film. And, spectacularly, the Dr. Bell Hooks talks about this more than a decade ago. And it seems like there hasn't been any further conversation about it. And I felt like it was connected to this kind of larger conversation about Black men and masculinity, but also about parenting Black girls and how we see them in our everyday.
What about the role of movie studios like Disney, which happens to be headquartered in Southern California?
Well, I think that, Disney is interested, just like many other companies, in making money. And they are going to make things that they believe we're going to watch, that we're going to support, that we're going to consume, not only as general consumers, but specifically as Black consumers. And I have seen in both this book, Black Girls and How We Fail Them, and my previous book, By Black, that, we have the power as consumers to say, this is not something that we're interested in watching, and they won't create it anymore. But if we continue to support these various narratives about Black people, especially Black girls, we'll continue to see more and more films and shows that create and use these same stereotypes.
What about the social media corporations like Facebook? What is their role and responsibility?
That's a great question. Facebook has become more than kind of a social media company. They control a lot of different media outlets, including things like WhatsApp and how you communicate with your friends and family. And Facebook, has gotten into media production and curation. They have created things like Red Table Talk that has pushed discourse about Black girls and Black women in various ways. And also as a production company, it's just like Disney in that they create things based on consumption. So if we decide that we don't want Facebook to control these various things anymore, they won't. But we have to control our consumption to then control their production.
What about the role of Christianity?
So I talk about the fact that Christianity has a large role. I grew up as a Southern Baptist in the South, and, Christianity has a lot to explain for the ways that Black girls and women are treated, both as kind of parishioners of churches, but, in our relationships, right? So there's constantly a conversation on social media about what role women should play, whether they should be submissive or not. And all of this comes from Christianity, but more importantly, it's being kind of spouted from pulpits, and ultimately, reflects how we want to be treated in our relationships with other people, but how we justify those relationships by, naming them as part of, God's relationship to us. And so they're connected in that way, both how we see ourselves, but also how we expect to be treated by other people. Christianity is a major part of that.
So in light of what you laid out finally, Professor Halliday, what is to be done?
Well, I first talk about in my book that, we first need to name the harm that's been done. I think, we've seen with the Me Too movement and various other, Black Lives Matter that people are willing to, name the really problematic things that are happening. But I think it's still being curtailed by the media and by this belief that, we shouldn't speak negatively about other Black people, about, people who have died. But, first we have to name the ways that we've been harmed. And that means calling people out and calling them in. And then second, that means like being in community with other people around how we can be accountable to each other when we do harm each other, but also how we can do better. And that, I think, would lead us to healing.
Well, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. Aria S. Halliday, author of the book BlkGirls and How We Failed Them. But thank you for joining us on Freedom Now, KPFK, Los Angeles.
Thank you.
And we hope that that interview continued to bring you some more food for thought here on KPFK 90.7 FM, Freedom Now. As we are in Fund Drive, we wanted to remind our listeners that for a donation of just $100, we're offering you a copy of Assata, an autobiography, the powerful story of a Black revolutionary, Mama Assata Shakur, who survived state violence and found asylum in Cuba. And also this hour, we do have a gift with a donation for just $80 to the station. You'll receive a pair of tickets to see the one and only Kamasi Washington. If you love cosmic jazz music, he will be live at the Blue Note in Hollywood. You've got 2 chances to witness this sonic revolutionary. You can go either on Thursday, October 9th at 7 p.m. or on Sunday, October 12th at 9:30 p.m. And so with an $80 donation, you'll get a pair of tickets. So you just need to call 818-985-KPFK. That's 818-985-5735. Or you can donate online at kpfk.org. And up next, our interview is on food autonomy in Chicago. And so from Los Angeles, solidarity to our Chicago fam for all that is happening on the ground. And so we honor all of this with our next interview of what's happening in Chicago.
For KPFK Radio Los Angeles, this is Gerald Horne. And with me on the line is Pancho McFarland, professor of sociology at Chicago State University and author of the book Food Autonomy in Chicago, Welcome to Freedom Now, KPFK Los Angeles, Pancho McFarland.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Horne. It's a pleasure. It really is.
It's a pleasure to have you. So what is food autonomy, and why did you write a book about it?
Okay, well, we'll get right into it then. So I've been working in Chicago for the last 20 years in the food movement here. And I started writing about it at the request of Dr. Devon Pena for the Environmental and Food Justice blog. And I was writing stories about what we're doing here and things that we're doing. And I was trying to put some words to it. People are using food justice, they like food sovereignty. And I chose food autonomy as the thing that we're aspiring to. Autonomy from sort of the autonomia, the autonomous Marxist tradition. I liked autonomy better. I felt it fit more. Food justice seems to be, there's some critique in here of the concept of justice that comes from the state that suggests that somebody else is the arbiter of what it means to be just. And I thought autonomy just fit. It's like, questions of self-determination, questions of some nationalism, but autonomy seemed to fit well with what we were doing, at least what we're aspiring to do, and I wrote a book about it because I felt like there's some important questions and some dialogues that we could be having in our movement, and I wanted this book to spark some of those dialogues.
So by food autonomy, do you mean residents of Chicago, for example, having a kind of independence and sovereignty from agribusiness? Do you mean they should grow their own food? Get into that, please.
Yes. So yeah, part of what we're doing, a major part of what we're doing is trying to take care of our community. We see that the industrial agriculture, the capitalist system is not feeding us. It's not caring for us. That's not what it's meant to do. And where I live on the south side of Chicago, there's rampant food insecurity. Access to healthy food is simply not there. And I had the good fortune to get together with a few folks who believe similarly, and were doing something about it. They were trying to feed their community. That is the Black Oak Center for Sustainable Renewable Living in Pembroke, Illinois, to get back to a sort of an independence, beginning to take back some of our lives from capitalism, from colonialism, from this white supremacist system and the heteropatriarchy, which I use the Algonquin word huetico to describe it. So that's exactly what we're trying to do.
So does that involve farmers markets, for example?
Farmers markets are part of it. Gardens. There's so many things that are going on. Farmers markets, gardens, bartering, giving away food, trading, low cost food. There's a lot that is happening. In the farmers markets that that I've worked with, that is the Healthy Food Hub from the Black Oak Center, it tried to design itself after an African market. So it wasn't just about food, it was about the development of culture. It was a reigniting of that sense of Black autonomy and self-determination. So we did things, it wasn't just food, it was culture, it was music, it was arts, it was, seminars, lots of things like that, sure.
Could you elaborate on the role of diasporan in your study?
Sure. I got to Chicago in 2005 and immediately got involved in some local activist work, focusing on health, and then I got deeper into the gardening and things like that. And I work for a predominantly Black institution, Chicago State University. I live on the south side of Chicago, immersed in a Black community. And my politics, I've always tried to have my politics be local, even hyper local. I think it's important to know our neighbors, to be involved with those folks. And that is who I was around. And that is who was teaching me, importantly, about all of these things. So in some ways, the role of diasporic Africans is they're my neighbors, my friends, my intimates, my acquaintances, but also this is who I learned from. I learned all of these. So the best of what's in this book, and hopefully there's a lot of good things in this book, comes from those folks, Africans in Chicago and the surrounding area. And most of my work has been with diasporic Africans, the folks who are part of my garden that I work with are primarily Black Americans, although we've had others come in and out, but primarily Black, 90+%. So these are the folks who taught me. These are the folks who are moving this movement along and innovating, creating. So yeah, this couldn't have happened without diasporic Africans.
So what is the role of anarchist Mexicans and Mexican Americans in your work?
In my work, when I was in graduate school, I have always been an activist since I was in high school. I was in graduate school in Texas, met anarchists, especially around the Zapatista revolution. So we worked in the Zapatista revolution beginning in '94 all the way up until I left Texas in '99. And that's where I learned about anarchism. I spent some time in Chiapas in the war zone with the Zapatistas and learned about, they weren't calling themselves anarchists, but the ideas as we understood them, giving them a language, were to us very anarchistic, and I became an anarchist as a result of that experience. And so as I'm going through my work, again, primarily the last 20 years has been on the food movement. As I'm going through my work, I'm using those principles: decentralization, federation, challenging hierarchies of all sorts. So that's the role. I mean, the intellectual role primarily. And so I studied a lot of anarchists of all sorts, whether it's Black, Indigenous, Mexican, or white comrades.
You mentioned the term a few moments ago, heteropatriarchy. What do you mean by that term, and how does it figure in your work?
Okay, so a lot of us are familiar with the patriarchy, where men rule and male culture is dominant. And I think one of the things that I've learned to add to an understanding of patriarchy is heterosexuality, and how that becomes the norm, or the heteronormativity, the norm of behavior, the expected sexual behavior and sexual identities. And one of the things that colonialism, or Huetico, has done to us is it has established a sex gender binary of male, female, and it's heterosexual. And as I'm reading more indigenous writers and authors, as I'm immersed in this movement, I'm learning that this is a central way in which colonialism has divided us and conquered us, is through this very strange, repressive understanding of our sexuality. And one of the reasons why it's so important to the work is because I see it playing out in our movement. We're easily, anti-racist, we're easily anti-capitalist, even anti-sexist in many ways. But sometimes we just have a hard time with the LGBTQ plus. And I saw some of my comrades who fit into those categories having a very difficult time. And I saw a good number of people moving away from what we were doing because of some of those biases, stereotypes, and discriminations that some of my other comrades were engaged in. So I had to really consider that and speak to them, learn about this, and become more sensitive to how we were doing it wrong, and how our movement, as powerful as it is, wouldn't be able to fully liberate us if a good portion of our community is feeling terrible about this, is feeling discriminated against.
Finally, Pancho McFarland, author of the book Food Autonomy in Chicago. What is the role of indigenous anarchists in your work?
Yeah, thank you for that question. When I got to the Healthy Food Hub in about 2008, I believe it was, I heard, for the first time, actually, I heard Black Americans saying that they were indigenous. And I started learning about this and trying to understand what is it that they mean. I always understood myself as a Chicano. We understand ourselves as indigenous people or de-indigenized people. And so I wanted to investigate, well, what do we mean by, excuse me, by indigenous? And so I immersed myself in the literature of Chicanos, of indigenous Americans, both in Canada, the United States, and in Mexico, and those Africans who were using that term as well. And so I started studying that, and I came upon, and again, this is 15, 20 years ago, I came upon indigenous anarchism. People like Cle Benally, Gord Hill, Tayaje Alford, and some others. And I said, this fits, because the one thing that many of my comrades in the past 40 years had really grated on me was they especially like my Marxist-Leninist friends would be the industrial working class and the industrial and never examining or rarely examining how industrialization has attacked nature and has attacked the people who are a part of that nature, who live intimately with it. And so there's all these schemes about how we're going to do our revolution. And it always seemed like that revolution was not paying attention to how nature, Mother Earth, and all our relations, as we say, mitakiasin, how nature was being attacked and how Native people were always being moved around. Even I remember a great book from the 80s, Marxism and Native Americans, where I first learned about this, where the Marxists were essentially trying to proletarianize a non-proletariat group, Native people. And so when I started reading indigenous anarchism and indigenous anarchist writers, I said, yes, this is what the anarchism that I was immersed in, that I was reading about and studying and even writing about in some cases, this is what is missing from it. It is this understanding of us as humans amongst many other of our relations, more than human beings. And these folks were sensitive to it. And I said, this is what we really need to be doing if we want to have a different society. We cannot continue to have the same old attack on nature. We live in it. It doesn't make sense. And we're seeing the consequences of that with our poor water and our poor air and our poison food. If we begin to think about how we are part of nature, how nature is a part of us, and we're not separate from it, then I think we become more sensitive to our home and we would treat it better. And that's, and that, again, that has to do with a lot with some of this ancient indigenous wisdom, including the Lacandon Maya, In Lakesh, which you are my other me. How do we treat each other? How do we treat nature if we see it as ourselves? And then we, the authors and activists like Cle Benally, rest in power, really showed me how that meshes really well with what I was already trying to do with the anarchist work that I had been involved in.
Well, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there, Pancho McFarland, but thank you for joining us on Freedom Now, KPFK, Los Angeles.
Thank you. Thank you.
And in closing, we'd like to thank all those who donated this hour. You can still donate for a donation of just $100. We're offering you a copy of Assata, an autobiography, the book. It's a powerful story of Black revolutionary Assata Shakur, who survived state violence and found asylum in Cuba, as we've honored her this hour. 818-985-KPFK, 818-985-5735, or for a donation of just $80, you'll receive a pair of tickets to see the one and only Kamasi Washington, who'll be at the Hollywood Blue Note. He'll be there Thursday, October 9th at 7 p.m. You'll get a pair of tickets, or you can go on Sunday, October 12th at 9:30 p.m. with a donation of just $80 to the station. These are tax-deductible donations. We want to thank our guest, Aria S. Halliday. Thank you, Pancho McFarland. Thank you to our producers and our board ops and all those who made today's program possible. Signing off for Freedom Now, this is Sister Thage, and until next week, as always, we stand ready for revolution.
We state these facts only to let you know that those of us who are revolutionary, Pan-Africanists, is not because we love revolution. It is historically determined, and we have no alternative but to follow history and to use history for the benefit of our people.